Sorry. Okay, so what I've looked at, just based on the marks, we're at the halfway point, which is really cool. So I know it's been tough. I think the first unit is usually the toughest with the understanding piece. This second unit is large and it's a lot of information and things like that to get through. So it is busy. As we finish off this unit, it'll get a little easier and stuff like that. I do believe as we wind down, the last couple of units are a little shorter the way I have it organized and just with the outcomes and stuff like that. Anyways, with that said, I was looking at it and I think the marks, we probably have a class average sitting around 70%. Okay, which is decent. Average high school class averages across the province usually run about 65% somewhere around there. So a little bit above that, which is pretty good. Now, here's something I want you guys to consider is for marks for the end of this course, everyone gets the class average. So everyone would get roughly about a 70%. What are your thoughts on that? Be honest, you're not going to hurt my feelings.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, so I was thinking, so class average is sitting about 70%, which is a reasonable grade. It's pretty decent. It's obviously a pass. So I was just considering giving everyone the class average at the end.
I mean, I'm not super comfortable with that.
No, why not?
It's definitely like a really good grade, especially for a 30-1 class. But I don't feel like my understanding of the class, like compared to other people's, like I'm not super comfortable with that being the number assigned for everyone.
Well, so we know, so your mark's higher than 70, obviously it's quite a bit higher. Okay, but that helps the class average, Annie. So you'd be helping. I mean, there's some kids that are working really hard and they're struggling to pass. There's a couple kids failing right now in that, so you'd really help them out. And it's not because they're lazy or anything like that. They just struggle. It's just kind of like in sports, people work really hard. They don't all make it to the NHL. They don't all make it to the Olympics, and stuff like that. But I look at 70%. It's a passing grade. It's a reasonable grade. You'd be helping out. So what are your thoughts? So you're not comfortable with that?
Well, I love the idea of helping people out, but I still I don't know how to word this. I'm still not super comfortable with it now.
Yeah, you're stunned. Okay, it's different, but I mean, 70 is a reasonable grade. Okay, and some people are probably saying there's not a lot of people on today, which is unfortunate. I want to see more of you, but some people be like, cool, I'd like that 70. Okay, but you're still passing and you're moving along. You get your credits. 70% is a reasonable grade. And in some of your writings, you've said you'd like to help people out. And actually, most of you guys, it was interesting reading your writings. You're like, yeah, we should help other people out. But also, you're still being rewarded. You're getting a 70 and you're moving on. Okay. I want to hear from anyone else. Anyone else? Pros or cons of that?
Certain marks are required to get into certain institutions and whatnot. So to take a person, I'm guessing that anemone is somewhere in the 90s, 95 or something above that.
Yeah. And I guess, 70, will it get you into university classes? Well, it depends on your other classes and averages and stuff like that. But yeah, to be competitive in certain programs, some places you need a 90. Nursing, for example, it's really high. Okay. Any other people's questions or on it? Comments? Okay. All right.
I'd like to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, me with social, I've always struggled a bit with like quizzes and tests, but assignments I'm pretty good at. So, I've always been able to just get in the 70s in social. So, In my opinion, I think it's fair, but yeah, I get it for people who have higher marks. It's nicer for them to get what they had.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. But we can't do it. We can't have it all both ways. We have to decide a way, and so on. And that's the thing I try to impress upon parents is sometimes too, is some parents think an average grade is 80. I'll ask a parent, well, what's an average grade? They go 80. I'm like, no, that's honor roll. You get your little name on a certificate and a plaque in the school, probably. Okay, an average is about a 65. The other thing as well is what it takes some time, and it's tough as a parent. I have kids as well, your guys' age and stuff, and we all want our kids to do very well, but even kids that get tutors, they work hard and everything else. Like I said, it's just like sports. Sometimes it just no matter I've had kids I've taught for many, many years. I've had kids that busted their butt to get a 60, to get a 65. I've had kids that worked hard to get in a 50. And I've had other kids that some of it has to do with the way we're wired and stuff like that, that are very, they're chill. They don't work very hard and they pull off those 80s and 90s because they do well in tests and they do well in essays and things like that. I don't know how to explain it except for they're wired a certain way. They can just absorb things and get it out there. And yeah, I've had kids that barely show up to class, come in, they'll write an exam, they get an 80. Okay. And there's all kinds of other things I could talk about and give examples of that. So yeah, it's just something for consideration I was considering. And I guess the thing would be is we do have those people that do struggle. And so Annie and others, if they've got their 90, then they're really helping out the rest of the group. So, was Thomas Hobbes right then? Are we inherently selfish? Okay. Or should we work towards the common good, like Karl Marx said? Okay. So I'm not having any feeling for this. I'm not thinking I like this. Who wants to support this? Do you want to raise your hand and support this? Okay. Who's against this? Put their hands, do the raise hand button. Okay. Got one. Okay. This is the thing about politics. You got to make your voice known or you don't have a right to speak afterwards. Okay. I always tell people if they start going on about politics, and the first thing I ask them is, "Did you vote?" Now, obviously, I don't with kids, and if they say no, I'm like, "I'm gonna have this conversation with you. Then come on, vote. No, okay." So I'm totally messing with you guys. Okay, I would of course never do something like this. It would be like illegal, anyways. So no, I'm just messing with you. Okay, what I wanted to do is put you in a situation where trying to understand how we deal with economics, and there's only so much to go around, and just politics in general and stuff like that. So what I suggested to you would be what type of ideological perspective. So again, I was warned some of you might run off and tell your parents, this guy is talking about giving us a class average. No. Well, I was, but it was totally made up. So what type of ideological perspective would that be if that's what we did? We gave you the class average.
That'd be like a far left.
A far left. Yeah. So like communism, really. Everyone's totally equal. Everyone gets the class average. Everyone gets the exact same marks. So that's communism. Okay, now I was hoping we'd have a broader spectrum of people here. I do this in my class every year, and I have some kids that say, "Cool, I love the idea. I think it's fantastic." And obviously those kids are the kids that typically say that are the ones that are below whatever average I set. Usually it's about 65. Now, some of those kids are those kids that struggle genuinely. They work hard, but they just can't get that class average. Some of those kids are not really that into school, and I'll say it, they're a bit slack and stuff like that. And so they're like, cool, I'm guaranteed to pass. That's good enough for me. And so it really depends often on the circumstance. And then I always have students that are have very good grades. And I've yet to have any of them say, yeah, I'm good with you averaging out my mark. Of course they're not. Okay. But it's something to consider when we're looking at economics in the moment, but also when you get into the Cold War section. Okay, so the Cold War, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, is basically a indirect confrontation between the ideologies of capitalism and communism. And so I want you to think about who would, or who would be attracted to communism. So if you jump back to Germany after World War One, people that were poor, that were broke, and didn't have anything, the chance of being equal and having their basic needs met, because the 70% is having your basic need met, it's a passing grade, they would jump on that. Okay. And so the idea is to try to put yourself and build a bit of empathy in the sense of, so if you're a poor person and you're struggling to meet your basic needs, then communism is appealing. If you're a person who's struggling to meet your basic needs economically, then the idea of moving more towards the left or socialism would be more appealing. In not all cases, but in many cases. And at the same token, if you're at the other end, you might feel very different about it. Now, the catch there, though, is you have these very, very ridiculously wealthy people in society, and they do give away. There's some of them that give away a tremendous amount of wealth. They help others out, philanthropy, and so on. And they donate, they sponsor people, they build schools, they do all that stuff, which is fantastic. Okay, so it doesn't mean they're selfish and so on and so forth. But do they want total equality? In most cases, we find that no. Now, remember, we're talking equality of economics in this case versus equality before the law and so on. And so it's just trying to understand why people think the way they are. And a lot of the time, it's based on circumstance. So if you're going into the Cold War or you're setting up an economic system and that, you think of the society you're in and which one is going to be the most appealing to them. In some cases, communism may work. If you look at China, China had a lot of mouths to feed, 400 million at the time in the 1940s, and there was lots of fighting going on. So communism offered them a viable alternative. If you look at Russia, which would become the Soviet Union, you still had a system in place that was like France, where there was vast inequalities in political power and economics. So the idea of everyone sharing everything equally, giving them more, would be very, very appealing, because they weren't at the idea of averaging everything out to a Russian peasant would be fantastic. Okay, so now if we were to do something like this, let's go back to the Marx analogy again for a moment. And I know Annie's in my school. Okay, so Annie works hard for her marks. Okay, so the question becomes, would Annie continue to work hard for her grades if she knew she was going to get a 70? What do you think, Annie? Would you?
I mean, personally, no, not as hard. Like,
No, let's be honest,
no
right?
point.
Let's be honest with ourselves. You know, it's just like summer school. I was talking to a person yesterday. They said, how's it going? I said, oh, it's good. I actually like it and that. I said, I much prefer teaching, but I think it's a good service and stuff like that. He said, oh, you enjoy it? I said, yeah, it's okay. Would I do it for free? No, I'm getting some extra money. Okay. So, does that make me a greedy, horrible person like Annie? No, not necessarily, right? I'm joking, Annie. I emailed you earlier, by the way. I told you I was going to pick on you.
Yeah.
So I wanted more of a fight from you, though. So anyways, but that's something to think about, right? Is now, and the honesty is that if all of a sudden, if I did this, and again, in a larger group discussion, that's where we often arrive, is my students at the top will say, well, why am I going to work hard then? Because I'm going to get the class average. But then I explain to them, but we need your 90s to keep the class average at a 65 or 70. If you work less, then the class average is going to go down. And that's exactly what happened in the Soviet Union. Okay, so the Soviet Union takes on the ideology of communism, extreme left. So it sets up a political system like that, and it sets up an economy based on that as well. But over time, what ends up happening is people realized, I'm guaranteed a job. They're going to give me affordable housing. I'm going to get paid basically the same, very close, no matter what I do. Why am I going to waste my time going to school? Okay, well, it'd be cool to be a doctor and help others. So people did those things. Okay, but why am I going to work really hard if I'm on an assembly line building a car? But no matter what, I get paid the same amount of money. And so over time, the economy ended up being very, very weak. Whereas the opposing side, the United States, you have initiative, all those values we looked at earlier. You have profit incentive and so on. And so people were personally rewarded. And so what we found, and history shows that under communism overall, it leads to an economy that isn't very productive. Okay, it's inefficient. Now, that's a negative of it. The positive is everyone's needs get met. Now, if you go to a capitalist system under the US, where it's you look after yourself and that, it has produced enormous wealth, but it also has a massive gap between the rich and the poor. Okay, known as the income gap, and there's vast disparities or inequalities that result in that as well. Okay, are there any questions or comments on that? I'm going to get into economics a little deeper here in a moment. Okay, and so yeah, just to be clear again, we're not doing the class average thing. Okay, now I'm thinking you guys can see this board, and like I said, I really encourage any questions or discussions. I love talking economics. I love teaching social studies. So now, today what I'm going to do is just do an overview of economics, and we're going to look at the different economic systems, the basic ones, and so on. Now, here's the thing. Every economic system in the world, doesn't matter how wealthy, how poor, or anything, they all face the same problem, okay, or the same issue, and it's the issue of scarcity. Okay, so hopefully you can read that. So that's SCAR, city, C-I-T-Y. Now I'm going to give you a definition to work with on that. You can look this up and everything else, but I'll give you a very basic one that works because it doesn't have to be that complicated. I'm all about details and understanding things, but I'm also about making it as simple as possible as well. Okay, so here's the definition. When limited resources try to satisfy unlimited needs and wants. I'll say that again. When limited resources try to satisfy unlimited needs and wants. There's only so much of everything in the world. Okay? Everyone has needs. We can't control them. We all have basic needs. However, everyone, it seems, has wants as well. So everyone has all these wants, and they, of course, all have needs, and there's only so much to go around. Okay, how many of you would like a new car? If Mr. Ferris says, and buy you a new car, who'd take one? Yeah, put your hand, raise your hand. Of course, who wouldn't, right? Okay, so, but they can't just give cars away to everyone that wants a new car. And so therefore, we get you to pay for them and stuff like that. And guess what? If I gave you a new car, I bet you a year down the road, if I said, hey, do you want a nicer, cooler car? Yeah, I'll take that. Of course. So everyone has, it almost seems in many cases, not everyone's the same, but there always seems to be a demand for more and more wants. And there is no society that has ever been able to sit back and go, whoo, we did it. Cool, we're done. We've met everyone's needs. We've given them everything they wanted. Let's just sit back and watch the good times roll. That's never happened in any society. And so every society has to figure out how it's going to deal with needs and wants. And how they do that is they ask themselves the 3 questions of scarcity. Okay, it's what, and I'll read these out in a moment, how, and for whom. Okay, so first they have to decide what goods are produced. Next, and we'll look at this in more detail in a moment, how are we going to produce these goods? And lastly, for whom or who gets the goods. So again, you can Google any of these things. You may see them worded a little bit differently, but this is the basics of it. What goods are produced? How are goods produced? And for whom? So who gets the goods? And so those are the questions, because no society is ever going to meet everyone's needs and wants. And so they have to figure out how they're going to best deal with scarcity. Every society has scarcity. I mean, you look at Alberta, for example, we have about 4 million people. We have the second or third largest supply of oil in the world, and we are flat broke. And not even that, beyond flat broke, we're running a massive deficit, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Okay? So we have to make these decisions on what we're going to focus our money on, how we're going to provide those goods and services, and for who gets them. And that is based on our ideological perspective. And when we started this course, we talked about beliefs and values. So really it comes down to, here's what I believe, and that's based on my values, and this is how I think the government should do it. And that's where that spectrum comes in. Okay? If you have any questions as I'm going through, please interrupt and just shout out. Okay? So what I'm going to do, I've got a basic Venn diagram here. I'm going to put the two kind of extremes on here and show you what this looks like. So over here, we have a market economy. Best example of that is the US, the United States. Over here, and they can go by different names, but the all-encompassing one kind of is a command economy. Now, you can look at different types of market economies. You can look at different types of, there's planned, there's command, there's centrally planned, there's indicative planning, there's different variations. But these are your two extremes. We're talking in generalities here. Okay? So some characteristics of each, and I'm looking at the extremes. Okay, under a command economy, you have all government or public business. Okay, under a market economy, you of course have private business or businesses. Now, a public business, I'll give you an example. So if you look at, we have services, so you're taking part in public education, okay, which is paid for by the government, which of course gets its money from the taxpayers. But other examples of public businesses, let's look at Pincher Creek, of course, I'm familiar with, has a nice indoor swimming pool that costs a couple $1 million. The town of Pincher Creek owns that. Okay, Fort Macleod has an outdoor pool here. The town of Fort Macleod owns that. Okay, anyone here up in Claresholm or other places? What do you got for pools? Riley, where are you from again?
Fort Macleod.
Okay, so you guys have the outdoor pool there. Yeah. Okay. So how much does it cost to go swimming there?
I'm not sure. It's not even open yet, actually.
No? Yeah, I guess. Sure. Yeah, probably about $3 or $4 maybe bucks or something like that. Yeah, and that probably still doesn't pay for the pool. So tax dollars and the government subsidizes that and they pay for that. We have public libraries as well. And so public businesses, and this would tie into services as well, is what the government provides. They own it. Okay, you often hear the term crown land as well. So that's government-owned land. Okay, we have public parks and so on. Okay, private businesses, just like private land and private businesses, they are owned by individuals. So you go down Main Street, Fort Macleod, and you've got all those individual businesses, those restaurants, those stores, the movie theater. Individuals own those. Okay, and they provide goods and services to the people. The government does not. Okay, so that's one of the key things to start with. And so really, that's the how you provide the the goods and services by public or private. Now, when it comes to the what, you look at what the people need first off. Now, I said the command economy, and the best example of that would be like under the Soviet Union, how they or what they provide. The first and foremost is always basic needs. And then if they have the money, if they can, plus wants, and I'm going to put that a little bit smaller when they can. But their main priority is to provide the basic needs of the people. When it comes to the market economy of the United States, private businesses, what are they going to provide a service for, or what goods are they going to produce? What goods? How did they decide that? What would they do? How would they choose?
I guess what there's demand for.
Yeah, exactly. So the what is what people want. If people want it, it will be provided. This is what people don't realize all the time. Oh, if Walmart comes to town, they'll destroy our businesses. No, you'll destroy the businesses and if Walmart comes to town. If you choose to stop going to your local stores and going to Walmart, you will destroy those local businesses. Walmart doesn't come in and go, hey, you're out of here and push them away. They can't do that. It's the people. And that's known as consumer sovereignty. Okay, consumer sovereignty. So this ties into what the people want. So consumers, they're sovereign, they're kings or queens. They decide what goods and services are produced, what is in demand. If no one wants the goods, what happens? Businesses don't make goods that people don't want. Businesses don't provide services for what people don't want. It's all based on consumer sovereignty. Okay? They decide. Okay? How many of you like McDonald's pizza? I'm going to ask Jet. Jet, do you like McDonald's pizza? Jet, I need you in. That a thing? I don't know. Has anyone tried McDonald's pizza?
Does McDonald's make pizza?
Exactly. It doesn't, but it did. And it wasn't bad. And the fact that here's what I want you to do after we're done today. I want you to go into your parents, okay, mom, dad, whatever, and say, thanks a lot. And just walk away. And they say, what? Just say, because of you, I will never get to have McDonald's pizza. It's your parents' fault. Okay, true story. I was a manager at McDonald's for like 9 years. So I was a little younger than you guys when I started there. And when I was your age, I became a manager. And this was a big store. And I'd run a crew of about 25 people at a time. Okay, we would pull in a couple $1 million a year. And it had 8 registers. So it was a lot bigger than all the little McDonald's you see around today. Okay, so I remember it would have been back in, I think, 1989. Okay, way before you guys were born. McDonald's decided it was going to get into the pizza business. And they said, we're going to make pizza. And they did all kinds of trial and error. They tried 2,000 different types of cheeses. I didn't know there was that many either. They had to have a pizza that could be made quick because it's fast food. They had to have it put into a pizza oven and cooked where the pizza cheese wasn't going to melt, but at the same time it's going to be cooked, all this stuff in like under 5 minutes because it's fast food McDonald's. So they prepared, I remember in my store, we got this pizza oven on the side, cost us $80,000. And this was like 30 years ago. We got all these other equipment. We trained everyone to have pizza. All of a sudden the materials came in, boom, we had McDonald's pizza. And everyone went, cool. And everyone ran to McDonald's and started buying pizza. And all the pizza places are like, well, this sucks because McDonald's was so far ahead of the rest of the fast food industry at the time with regards to just business. And that's changed actually rapidly. Subway is your number one growing chain in the world today. So people did it, and then all of a sudden, and they didn't expect they were going to become a pizza place. They said, we're going to offer it because, hey, when people want pizza, they don't go to McDonald's. Because like Jet said, is that a thing? No, it isn't, and it wasn't then either. But they said, let's steal some of the business from the pizza people and get them over here. So if they don't want our Big Mac or quarter pounder, they'll have our pizza. And they figured it was going to be about 10% of their sales. Well, at the end of the day, your parents decided, if we want pizza, we're not going to go to McDonald's for it. And so McDonald's started to realize sales are slipping. They knew it'd be busy at first, then slow down, they'd level it out about 10%. Then it slipped and slipped. Then all of a sudden we were no longer making pizzas. They were bringing in these frozen pizzas that we thawed out the night before. Then we throw them in the oven. And then finally they just said, we're done. Massive failure. So McDonald's, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, can't just produce what it wants. So what goods are produced in a market economy? It's based on what the people want. That's your what. How are they produced? Private businesses or public businesses? Okay, the power of the consumer. Like your celebrities as well. Your celebrities are nothing without you guys supporting them. Okay, when you say, oh, that person sucks, they can't sing. Well, millions of people think they can and they're buying their stuff. Okay, just for the record, Drake, he can't sing. Why you guys buy his stuff, I don't understand. Okay, so lastly, for whom? Who gets the goods in a command economy? Who's going to take a stab at that? Who gets the goods?
Everyone.
Everyone. So for whom? Everyone. What about over here? Who gets the goods?
Whoever can afford it.
Yeah. Whoever has the money. Now, the truth be told, the United States is not a pure market economy like Adam Smith, laissez-faire, and so on and so forth. They do have some things in place to provide some services and things to the people. However, it's very minimal, and it's even vastly different compared to that of Canada. So where's Canada fit in all of this? Who knows where Canada's at?
Middle.
Yeah. Do you know what the name is? What would we call Canada's economy?
Nope.
No? Okay. Anyone else? Take a guess. It's a mixture of. Yeah. Haley, you got?
Yeah, I was just going to say a mixed economy.
Yeah, so it's a mixed economy. Okay, so it comes down here. If we were to erase this, mess up my beautiful circles, then you have a mixed. Now, this is where most economic systems fit today. They considered a mixed economy. You do have some extremes. The Soviet Union would have been a command economy. The US is the closest we have to a market economy. Most technically will fall into here. But if we're looking at from an ideological perspective, these are the characteristics. A mixed economy such as Canada, we have public business, we have private business. And those public businesses can be at all different levels of government. So I use the example of swimming pools. Okay, Pincher Creek, for example, has a nice indoor swimming pool. They charge you $4 or $5 to work, or to not to work there, to go to the swimming pool there. That doesn't pay the bills. They have to rely on tax dollars and fundraising and everything else to keep that pool running. And so if I'm a business person, if I won $2 million, okay, that I don't know if I could retire on that, probably could, okay, but I wouldn't take $1.5 million of it and put an indoor pool in Fort McLeod. Not a chance. Okay, not that I don't like the people of Fort McLeod, but I know I'd lose my money. I would never, ever be able to get back my $1.5 or $2 million on that pool, charging kids $3 or $4 to go in there. Okay, so public businesses step up where private ones don't in a mixed economy. And that's because private businesses don't, because their main incentive is profit driven. Okay, Whereas on public and command, it's about meeting the basic needs of everyone. So it comes into our value system of everyone's basic needs met versus this. So you can start taking your values from your value sheet and populating this. Okay, a lot of them are very specific. One of the key things that comes out of this with consumer sovereignty is freedom of choice. And out of these two things, and if I'm cut off here, I'll just say it loudly, competition. And competition benefits the consumer. It absolutely does. Competition leads to higher quality. And I'll give you an example. Okay, what is that? Can you see my diagram? What is that?
A vehicle.
Yeah. Now, I'm a terrible drawer, but I can draw this vehicle. That's exactly what it looks like. It's known as a Lada. It's a cheap little boxy car. It's ugly. Okay. And it's what you would get in the Soviet Union. Okay. You'd have these scrappy little square box cars. Versus in other places, you have lots of competition. So you have lots of choices. This time last year, I went out and bought a brand new car. I picked what I wanted for priorities. I wanted something a certain way. And I went out and every car dealership, I wanted something that was all-wheel drive, really good on gas. And those are my two main priorities. Then I started looking at other features. And I wanted something fairly small. Every dealership, every brand has that type of vehicle. Every dealership. Years ago, going back 10 years ago, not everyone had an all-wheel drive. Now they do. And not everyone, going back 20 years ago, not everyone cared about fuel mileage either. At $1.42 a liter yesterday paid up or spent. Wow, crazy. So those are my priorities. And then I wanted warranty and all this other stuff. And then I went through, but those were my main ones. Every dealership I went to, every brand had an all-wheel drive, small little all-wheel drive that was good on gas. Plain and simple. Then I start to look at other features, and then it comes down to money. Okay, now none of them are cheap. But if only one car company made a small, good on gas, all-wheel drive, they could charge more. But they don't. So competition gives you choice. It gives you better quality. And it'll give you, it's more efficient, and it just, in the end, it gives you what you want. When there's no competition, you get that as your vehicle. And then half the time, if I was driving a Lada, after probably a year or two, I'd be doing this to get to work. Okay, putting my thumb up. All right, so that's a brief overview of economics and of scarcity. Are there any questions? No? So every economic system, every society deals with scarcity. It's all based on your values. It would make no sense to have political values that were not the same as your economic values. Unless, of course, you are in what country? Take a guess. Do you know which country is a hypocrite right now? Has been for about 20 years. Their political values and their economic values don't mesh up. They're a bunch of communists. You have no political power, but yet they're home to a bunch of billionaires now and millionaires. Anyone want to take a guess?
Is it China?
Yeah, China. So China has been officially communist since 1949 under Mao. People don't have a lot of political power or anything like that. But at the same time, what they started doing, particularly in the 1980s, is they started to allow entrepreneurship. They started to allow free enterprise to move their economy ahead. Now, the government's still in charge. The government still has a lot of state-owned businesses now, but this is what they've done. And so now you have the emergence of millionaires and billionaires coming out of China. And that's why I believe in your lifetime, you'll see a couple billion Chinese people line up to vote someday. Because ultimately, economic power, there's no way people are going to stay forever with all that money and not have a lot of political power. So in the end, you'll end up with a system either where they'll open up the vote, those people will vote for democracy or push for it, or you'll have a situation like France before the revolution where you have a group of very wealthy people and everyone else. And so something's got to give in China in the next couple of decades. I'm surprised it hasn't already. But that's a little bit of hypocrisy that goes on. So if you look at Alberta as an economic system unto itself, which it is to a degree, we are very much right-wing, typically under the Conservatives. They're the UCP. For a while, for 4 years, we went more socialist to the left. And that's why you saw, based on the values of the NDP versus the Conservatives, are very different values. And that's why under the NDP, you saw all of a sudden legislative changes, workers' rights, increased minimum wage, legislation to protect workers if they're injured on the job, for safety, for things like that. Okay. And you see more regulations, more controls as well. And those things, of course, come with a cost. Whereas Alberta typically is, hey, we're going to give you lots of freedom. We're not going to tax you much. Where Albertans are the lowest taxed in the country. And we're going to let you figure it out. That's your incentive. And in the end, we're going to have a high functioning economy that's very efficient because everyone's kind of looking after themselves. Although we still have public services and that. Okay. Any questions? Move aside for a moment. Okay, here's your economics. I want to just spend a couple more minutes looking at one more thing because I think I can explain it fairly easily. Have you guys started looking at Keynesian economics yet? I don't know if you guys got that far yet. No? Okay. I can't remember the order of everything and all the time where it's at. I'm going to give you a pre-teach it for a moment, just Keynesian economics. I'll draw a little diagram for you and explain it to you. And then when you read it and do the parts on economics, oh yeah, that's down the chart a little ways. But I wanted to give, like I said, a little intro for it today because you're getting up to there. Also, I am going to put a sheet up. I won't put it up immediately. It's a very simplistic thing. That explains scarcity again, but I want you guys to kind of get into the research and look at it on your own first, and then I'll put it up as kind of a summary. But I will introduce Keynesian economics to you. Okay, so John Maynard Keynes was an economist, 1920s, 30s. So it's K-E-Y Keynes. So John Maynard Keynes. And here's the best way to explain it. So this is grade 9 stuff again. So in economics, this is the boom bust cycle. And boy, oh boy, does Alberta ever follow this. Oil prices high. Woohoo! Alberta, let's all go there. It's awesome. Oil prices low. Our economy sucks. We're going to perish. Okay, that's the Alberta system. And the US system is definitely like that. Alberta is very right, very hands-off, so it's not very regulated. So it follows the boom bust cycle. Okay? So this is the boom, obviously. This is the bust. If it's really bad, it's classified as a depression. The Great Depression was 1929. Another really bad one was 2008. Okay. The economy is doing well. It's called peak or boom. When it starts to slow down, the economy is going into does anyone know the term? Economy is slowing down. It's an R word. Not recession. Recession, yes. Okay, so when we get here, you're entering a recession. So we're going down here, we hit a recession. If it gets really bad, you're in a depression. Your hope is, and when things go over here again, you're at boom again. This is another R word. This is recovery. So What's this got to do with that dude over there? I call him the credit card economist. So what Mr. Keynes proposed, he said, when you're in a boom, great, back off, leave things alone. When you see the signs of a recession and things are starting to go down, stop. The government now needs to intervene. They need to take some money. This is Keynes. And they need to inject it and basically build a bridge and start on our road to recovery in order to avoid a bust or ultimately a depression. That's Keynesian economics. It's actually fairly straightforward. When you read some of that stuff, sometimes they make it sound all complicated. It's really not that complicated. This is it. Economy's going into a recession. Let's spend money and cause a recovery. Now here's the catch. Where do you get the money from? We just talked about scarcity. Are governments oozing with money? No, they're not. So they borrow money. And then they cut across and they go back. And that's the idea. So I'll give you, I like to give little stories and analogies so you can kind of understand it a little bit. So I'm a landlord, okay? I own a house in Lethbridge I rent out and pays basically the bills and stuff like that. So let's say all of a sudden, actually I got a bill for $3,000 just this week because I had a pipe issue, okay? Well, my renters can't pay for that. So I have to decide, well, I have to fix that issue. So $3,000. Where do I get the money? So if I don't have the money, what do I do? So let's say I don't have the money to fix that piping issue that's $3,000. Then I can't just let my investment of a couple $100,000 fall apart. I have to deal with it. So my rental property is going into a recession. I need $3,000 to fix it so that I can keep collecting rent and people can live in it. So I have to inject money in there. Keynes would say to me, okay, Mr. Freer, if you don't have the money, use your credit card, pay it off. Pay for that pipe, and over time with your rental money, you make a little extra, then you pay it off. If rent goes up, if you put new renters in and you charge them a couple extra $100 more a month, great, take that money and pay your credit card off. So that's a story, an example of what Keynes would look like kind of in a real life situation. And half of that story is true. I got a nice $3,000 bill. So that's Keynesian economics. Things start to go into recession, you move into that. So what he would propose, and this is actually what the NDP was doing in 2015-16, they knew we were heading into a recession. Okay, everyone knew we were heading into a recession because oil prices just before the Conservative Party was out, they had no control over it either. None of us can control oil prices here in Alberta. So oil prices were going down and our economy largely is tied into the price of oil. And so what happened when the NDP came into power, they inherited this as well, as you had very low oil prices, you had the perfect storm. And the Conservatives were dealing with this as well. And so what they said is, we got to keep people working. People are getting laid off in the oil industry. Let's invest in schools. Our population's booming. We need hospitals and schools anyways. They cost millions and millions of dollars to build. Let's keep those people that are getting laid off working. And we're going to borrow money and we're going to build schools and we're going to build hospitals. We'll get those done in the next few years. And as the oil industry picks up, those people can go back to work in that area and then they're making money and then we'll pay those things off. So there's pros and cons to that. Yes, you avoid an ultimate bust. You keep people working. Also, you're building, in this case, necessary infrastructure that you're going to need eventually anyways. And typically you would probably get a better deal on your labor because supply and demand, there's more unemployed people. So they'll work for $40 an hour instead of $75. However, you've got to make sure you pay the bills off. And that's the problem that governments get into. Okay, and that leads us to the last thing I'll talk about. But first, I'll open it up. Are there any questions on this? So when you start to read about Keynes, it's really not that complicated. Things are going bad, put the money in. Even if you don't have it, borrow it. Eventually, when you hit the peak, get the money back. Okay, last concept I want to teach you then, I'm going to erase this. It's all being recorded anyways. Is debt and deficit, which we hear a lot of in Alberta these days, and we've had for years. In the early 2000s, right around the year 2000, Alberta wasn't technically, I won't get into it, it's complex, but they were saying they were debt-free, but we weren't running a deficit, we can say that. Then Mr. Klein resigned and stuff like that. Conservatives went on and then they started running deficits for 7 straight years. And that caused a debt. Then the NDP ran big deficits, and now your UCP is running big deficits. So what's the difference between the two? A deficit versus debt. A deficit is spending more money than what you make, which leads to debt, which is your overall debt. So again, I'm going to give you a scenario, a real life situation. Okay, you guys will go out in a few years, you'll probably get jobs and get an education, get a job, and you'll probably get into debt fairly quickly. That's kind of what most people do. Okay, sometimes I get kids who are like, oh no, I'm going to pay cash for my house. Okay, well, I guess you know some kind of magical mathematics, or you're inheriting a lot of money. Okay, so what ends up happening, let's say you make, let's give you $100,000. Actually, I'm going to do the math. I'm going to change that. You're only getting 60 grand. Okay, $60,000. Okay, that's your salary. Okay, so that works out to $5,000 per month. At the end of the day, what you'll take home of that is a lot less. But let's say you take home, you'd be lucky if you take home $3,500 a month. Okay, that's what you have to work with. $3,500 per month. Okay, and actually for a university graduate or similar starting out, that would be a reasonable and fair salary that's out there. Works out to $5,000 a month times 12 is 60,000. Say 3,500 per month take home. Okay, stick with me. Now, what do you got to do? You go out, you buy a vehicle. Okay, you buy a house. So you've got your expenses. So you get your car, get your house, that thing called food. Okay, all those other things, your phone bills, and the cost of a house, you've got mortgage, you've got your cable bill, your internet, your insurance for your house, blah, 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 blah. This is what you have to work on. That's it. Okay, it's scarcity. You only have so much to work on. Here's what some people end up doing. So when you get a house, you're going to borrow money from a bank. That's how it usually works. Okay. So houses cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. You just got out, you've got student loans and everything. You're making 60 grand and your house costs 300 grand. You don't have 300 grand. Oh, I'm going to save up and pay cash for it. Okay. $3,500 a month. Okay. So if you can save 3,000 of that a month, live off of 500 in your parents' basement. So $3,000 a month, 36,000 a year. You're going to be living in your parents' basement for 7 or 8 years. Okay. To pay cash for your house. Just saying, that's the math of it. Okay, so you're going to borrow from the bank. You're going to borrow, let's say, $300,000 for a house. That's now your debt. Okay, now, having debt like that isn't a huge deal. No one wants debt, but it's how we function in our society is set up. So if you have a $300,000 debt to the bank, let's say your payments, I would guess on $300,000 is probably about $1,500 a month. So that's your mortgage payment. That fits into here. So you have a debt of $300,000. Here's where it gets really scary. If all of this adds up, every month, because you had to have a really cool car, your house, extravagant food, you like to party and go out and stuff like that. If your expenses come out to $4,000 a month, you've got a problem. You're making $3,500 a month. Your expenses are $4,000 a month. Your deficit is now $500 per month times 12. So after 1 year, you've added $6,000 to your overall debt. And you're like, okay, no big deal, Mr. Fair. You just said that debt isn't a problem. Well, this you were paying off though over time. You can't pay this debt off if you're running a deficit. You have no extra money. And so that's what governments do. Governments run deficits and then they accumulate large debts. If there's no plan to pay it off, the debt is going to continue to grow to eventually, and if you want to look at something really cool and scary and see what you're inheriting, not only are you not getting pizza from McDonald's from your parents, blame your grandparents for this one and your parents. Go on and type in Canadian debt calculator and you can watch the numbers spin nonstop. That's the interest accumulating thousands and thousands of dollars per second on the debt in Canada. Okay, that's what you're inheriting. So you're not getting pizza, you're getting debt. Okay, so there has to be a plan to pay it off. And so, for example, what you're seeing right now in Alberta is there was additional expenses with COVID, and you've definitely seen it on the federal level because it's the federal government that paid for most of it. But the federal government, under Mr. Trudeau, has run massive deficits to help pay for the additional costs and to help people that were losing their jobs and that during this whole COVID thing. Provincial government has done that as well to a lower level. And so they're running deficits. On top of that, in Alberta, we don't have very good oil prices. They're starting to pick up now. So Alberta is running, they ran a 7-year deficit under the Conservatives. And then when the NDP got into power, they ran huge deficits. Oil prices down, things like that. Spending to keep the economy going was their argument. Building schools, stuff like that. And now and then when the UCP came in, oil prices were down. Mr. Kenney reduced our salary basically by cutting corporate taxes to try to stimulate business. So he basically cut our pay. And then with COVID, oil prices down, the cut in pay and everything else, even bigger deficits. And so, even bigger debt. And so that's where we're at. And so now in the news, you're seeing there's time to deal with this. You can't deal with a debt until you deal with a deficit. Well, how would you deal with a deficit if this was you as a person? You either have to get more money or you have to cut your expenses. And that is going to be based on your values and what your beliefs are. So, what does that look like at the provincial level? How do you get more money? You tax more. That's how governments get their money. You charge more for services, charge to go to parks, put in a PST. We're the only province that doesn't have one. Or you cut your expenses. Nurses' salaries, roll them back. Teachers, whatever. That's where most of your money goes to. But over 40% of our tax dollars go to healthcare. About 23% goes to education and then other things. And so that's where we're at now. And so that's tying in what's going on in the news now, to economics and that. So you guys are you might be able to vote in the next election. So you have to look at your values. And then this is one small part of it. Do you want your government to focus on cutting their expenses or increasing their revenue? Okay, and so with the current government we have, it's definitely about they're not going to touch revenue, they're going to cut expenses. And so it depends on where you fit in. That's debt and deficit. But bottom line is Alberta has a massive debt and we're running massive deficits and we have been for a number of years. And it's scarcity. So there you go. That's it. I'm done. Any questions? There's the basics of economics. You learned about the economic systems. You learned about scarcity, the basic economic systems, boom bust cycle, and debt and deficit. A lot of stuff to cover, and we're just over an hour. Okay. Oh, and we also learned that you guys wouldn't make very good communists earlier with your grades. Okay. All right. Any questions?
Not really related to the.
Oh, you've cut out there, Annie. Annie's frozen. Okay, we'll wait for Annie to unfreeze there. Any other questions with regards to the economics first? Okay. Then I'll hang out, and if anyone has any other questions, I'll stay on and we can address those. Okay. Otherwise, have a great day. You're halfway through today, which is really cool. Take a little bit of time off on the weekend. Next week will be a little bit busy, and then it should slow down a little bit. We'll wind her up in the following weekend. Boom, social 30 done, which is pretty cool. Okay, I'll hang out here. I'm going to stop recording at this point and just take any questions. And I'll provide a copy of this